Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel all about BI. In this video I am going to tell you how do we load multiple Excel files from Azure storage to Azure SQL table on the fly. There is no SQL table in the sink which is already created. We are just going to create them on the fly, and we are going to load multiple Excel files of different sheet names and schema. Okay, this is the use case. So when do we come across such situations? There may be instances in your project where you have bulk set of files sitting in Azure storage, and you have to get the data from them loaded to Azure SQL table for further data exploration and analysis purposes. Okay, once you get the data loaded to Azure SQL table, you will not be using the Azure XLSX file anymore. Okay, this is going to be an on-time exercise kind of. So we need not worry about making the solution dynamic right now. In case you have to make it dynamic, what do I mean by that is, I say I have a.xlsx and b.xlsx here in my Azure storage, and both are having different sheet names, and which I have to load it to my SQL table, right? So when we have to make it dynamic, what we have to do, we have to make use of an Azure function or Azure Databricks notebook to get the sheet names dynamically using pandas library or something similar. Okay, so if you don't have to worry about future and it is going to be the one time exercise, we can hard code the file name and sheet name to be loaded. Okay, in case you are interested to get the sheet names dynamically, we already discussed how to use Azure functions to get the sheet names dynamically. We also have a video to do this using Azure Databricks notebook as well. Okay, so we are not going to see the dynamic part of it in getting the sheet names dynamically. Instead, since I said this is going to be a one-time exercise for you, so you can hard code the sheet names and file names in a file or table which we call lookup table or lookup file. From there we can take it up for data loading. Okay, so if you see, my lookup file is very simple. It just has file name, which it has sheet name, it has table name, and from a.xlsx I have to load from subscribe sheet. From b.xlsx I have to load from ADF sheet. If you have multiple sheets in the same file, you will have one more row saying a.xlsx and that sheet name and the table name. Okay, like this you will be having. So right now my lookup file looks like this. I'm going to make use of this for loading to my SQL table. Okay, so how do we do that? The first thing that we need to do is to use a lookup activity. This will be looking up the content from my lookup file. Okay, so I'm pointing to a delimited text file that is already there. So I'll just make sure it is pointing to Azure file system container and lookup.csv. When I look at the data, we will have 3 columns. Alright, so coming back, we will make sure first row as header is selected here, and then we can clear the schema and import it again. So we make sure that the column names are intact in the lookup file in the dataset. Okay, so this is step number 1. We are pointing to the lookup file that is created using a lookup activity, and we have to remove this option first row only, and then I'll run my pipeline. So this is going to get me the rows from my lookup file. So in our case it's going to be 2 records. So let us see how it brings. So as I said, we have a count of 2, and inside the value array we are seeing 3 details. A.xlsx, in that sheet name is subscribe, the table name to be created is table underscore subscribe, and file name is b.xlsx, each sheet name is ADF, and the table to be loaded is tbl underscore ADF. So when we look at these properties, right, these are what going to be used by the loop that we are going to create next. Okay, so we have the file content ready in lookup activity, and then I'm going to make use of a for each loop activity to loop through the value array that is brought by my lookup activity. So if you look at the output, the value array is what is bringing the details of my file. Okay, so from the for each loop I am going to point it to my lookup activities output dot value array. Okay, so this is how we point to the value array, and then inside for each loop I am not making it sequential because I want it to run parallelly. Okay, even if you have 40-50 files, it can run parallelly. because we are not going to make use of any set variable inside the for each loop. Only when you are having a set variable inside for each loop, you cannot make it run parallel. Okay, so it will give unexpected behavior. So I'm leaving it to run in parallel. So inside for each loop, I'm just adding a copy activity, and copy source is going to be my Excel file. So for that, I'm going to create an Excel data source, okay, pointing to my data lake storage inside Azure file system container. Okay, I'll say okay. Now we have to open this data set and make sure of certain things. Here I have to first make sure I'm checking first row as header. This is number one. Second is I have to parameterize my file name and sheet name, okay, because this has to come dynamically. So I'm clicking parameters and adding two parameters, one for file name and another for sheet name. Coming back, I'm using the file name in the file name part, and then in the sheet name I'm clicking and choosing dynamic content and then clicking the sheet name. So right now I have made my file name and sheet name dynamic. Okay, so this is what I'm going to supply from my for each loop. So inside for each loop, if I click on copy data, I still see just only one parameter, right? But we created two parameters in the data set. Sometimes it happens, it doesn't flow immediately to the data set copy activity source. So what we have to do, we have to choose a different source, and then I'll just point to a dummy sink, and then I'll publish my pipeline. So what I want to do is, I created an Excel data set where I have two parameters which is not flowing to my copy activity source. So what I'm doing, I'm just pointing it temporarily to a different data set, and then I'm publishing my pipeline. Okay, sometimes this will happen, so for that only I'm just doing it in front. So I'm publishing my pipeline. I want to make sure the Excel 3 dataset that I created with two parameters are flowing properly to my copy activity source. For that I'm doing this activity, and once publishing is complete, I can come back to my copy data source, and then I can repoint to my Excel 3 dataset that I already created now. If I choose Excel 3 now, you will be seeing two parameters. So previously we were not seeing, that's why we made the source point to a different data set and then published the pipeline and came back to the source again. So what is the file name, what is the sheet name that we have to pass it to the copy activity source? It comes from the for each loops item function. So item.file name brings me the file name to be loaded, and then item.sheet name points to the actual sheet. Okay, so this thing we have done. So source part is complete. We have pointed to the file name dynamically and the sheet name dynamically. So what about sync? We have to create an Azure SQL table, okay, in the name of the table that is there in my lookup file. So I'm just clicking dynamic content, and then in my lookup file I have a property called table name which I can use for my Azure SQL table. And then we have to make sure auto create option is chosen for us to create the table dynamically. I'll just open this data set and clear the schema if at all anything is there, and then I have to make sure I'm parameterizing the table name as well, because every time I'm going to pick up a sheet name from the file name, I have to load it to a different table, not the same table again and again. Okay, so I have to add a parameter called table name in my data set, and I have to make that come here, so that what we are doing now, we are parameterizing the source file name, sheet name, and the sync table name. Okay, so that is all we have to do now. Coming back to the copy data, we have chosen auto create table, so we are looking good now. I'll just run the pipeline and see if it works. The pipeline is complete now. we have loaded 2 files as mentioned in the lookup file. So I'm just going to my table and see if the tables were already created. So table underscore ADF, table underscore subscribe. So we have the tables created. Let us look at the data. So I have selected table underscore ADF. So this is the data that we had in v.xlsx in ADF sheet. Okay, so we are looking at the some sales data, and similarly this is also similar data I copied into a.xlsx. So underscore table underscore subscribe also has similar set of data, but just that I wanted to show you how do we loop through multiple sheets with different names from different files and get it loaded to Azure SQL table for your data exploration purposes. So I hope this made sense, and if you have any questions, you can let me know in the comment section. Thanks a lot for watching this video. We'll catch up in another video. Thank you so much.